The morning sun cast long shadows across the courtyard of Windsor Castle as Detective Sergeant Marcus Thompson adjusted his radio and checked his watch. It was 7:30 a.m. on a crisp October morning, and the usual hustle and bustle of palace life was already in full swing. Staff members hurried across the stone pathways, carrying tea trays and newspapers, while gardeners tended to the perfectly manicured lawns that stretched as far as the eye could see. Marcus had been working royal protection for 12 years, but today felt different. There was an electricity in the air, a tension that made the hair on the back of his neck stand up. He had received an unusual briefing earlier that morning from his superior, Chief Inspector Williams, about a routine security check that needed to be conducted on all vehicles entering and leaving the palace grounds. The Queen Consort Camilla was scheduled to depart for a charity event in London at 9 a.m., and her sleek black Bentley was already waiting in the private courtyard. The car gleamed in the morning light, its chrome bumpers reflecting the ancient castle walls that had witnessed centuries of royal history. Marcus approached the vehicle with his security checklist in hand, expecting nothing more than another routine inspection. As he walked around the Bentley, Marcus noticed something odd. The car sat slightly lower on its left side, as if carrying extra weight. His trained eye caught subtle details that others might miss. A small scratch on the passenger door handle, a tiny smudge on the otherwise pristine dashboard visible through the tinted windows, and, most peculiarly, the faint outline of what appeared to be an additional compartment behind the dashboard. Marcus had inspected hundreds of royal vehicles throughout his career. He knew every inch of the standard security features, the hidden communication devices, and the reinforced panels designed to protect their precious passengers. But this Bentley had modifications he had never seen before. The dashboard appeared to have been recently altered, with slight color variations in the leather that suggested recent work. His radio crackled to life. "Thompson, what's your status on the vehicle inspection?" came the voice of Chief Inspector Williams. "Still conducting the check, sir. May need a few more minutes," Marcus replied, his voice steady despite the growing unease in his stomach. The Queen Consort's private secretary, a thin man named Geoffrey Hartwell, approached with obvious impatience. "Officer, Her Majesty needs to depart shortly. Is there a problem with the vehicle?" Marcus looked up from his inspection, noting the nervous energy radiating from Hartwell. The man's hands trembled slightly as he adjusted his glasses, and there was a thin sheen of perspiration on his forehead despite the cool morning air. "Just following standard protocol, sir. Won't be much longer." But Marcus knew he couldn't ignore what he was seeing. Years of training had taught him to trust his instincts, and every instinct was telling him something was wrong with this car. He made a decision that would change everything. "I'm going to need to conduct a more thorough inspection," Marcus announced, pulling out his phone to call for backup. "No one enters or leaves until this is complete." Hartwell's face went pale. "Officer Thompson, surely you understand the sensitivity of delaying Her Majesty's schedule. This is highly irregular." "Security is never irregular, sir," Marcus replied firmly. "I'm following proper procedures." Within minutes, 2 additional security officers arrived, along with a specialized vehicle inspection team. The courtyard, which had been peaceful moments before, was now buzzing with activity. Palace staff gathered at a respectful distance, whispering among themselves about the unusual commotion. Marcus began his detailed inspection with the exterior of the vehicle. The Bentley was immaculate, as expected for a royal car, but his trained hands detected slight irregularities. The weight distribution was definitely off, and when he pressed gently on certain areas of the bodywork, he could feel give where there should be solid metal. "Sir," called Officer Janet Davies, who had been examining the trunk area. "You need to see this." Marcus joined her at the rear of the vehicle. Davies had discovered a small, almost invisible seam in the trunk lining that shouldn't have been there. It was expertly concealed, but, under close examination, it appeared to be an access panel to a hidden compartment. The puzzle pieces were starting to come together, but Marcus knew he needed to be absolutely certain before making any accusations. Royal protocol demanded the highest level of evidence before any action could be taken that might embarrass the crown. He returned to the front of the vehicle and focused his attention on the dashboard area that had first caught his eye. Using a small flashlight, he examined the interior through the slightly tinted windows. The irregularities were more obvious now. The dashboard had definitely been modified, and there appeared to be a hidden compartment behind the instrument panel. "I need the keys," Marcus announced to the gathered crowd. Geoffrey Hartwell stepped forward, his face flushed. "Officer Thompson, I must protest. This is highly unusual and completely unnecessary. Her Majesty will be most displeased with this delay. The keys, sir, Marcus repeated, his voice leaving no room for argument. Reluctantly, Hartwell produced a set of keys from his jacket pocket. Marcus noticed that the man's hands were now visibly shaking, and beads of sweat had formed on his upper lip despite the cool morning air. Marcus unlocked the Bentley and slid into the driver's seat. The interior smelled of expensive leather and the subtle perfume that he recognized as the Queen Consort's signature scent. Everything appeared normal at first glance. The seats were perfectly positioned, the floor mats were spotless, and the usual royal security features were in their proper places. But, as he examined the dashboard more closely, Marcus could see clear evidence of recent modification. The leather around the glove compartment had slight color variations, and when he pressed gently on the area below the radio, he felt movement where there should have been solid support. Officer Davies appeared at the passenger door. "Sir, I found something else. The suspension has been modified to carry additional weight, and there are fresh scratches on the undercarriage that suggest recent installation of something heavy." Marcus nodded grimly. His suspicions were being confirmed with each new discovery. This was no ordinary royal vehicle. It had been systematically modified to carry hidden cargo. He began a careful examination of the dashboard, looking for the mechanism that would open the hidden compartment he was now certain existed. His fingers traced along the edges of the various panels, feeling for pressure points or hidden switches. Then he found it. A small, barely visible button concealed behind the air conditioning controls. When he pressed it, there was a soft click, and a section of the dashboard swung open like a small door. What Marcus saw inside made his blood run cold. The hidden compartment was filled with documents, photographs, and what appeared to be recording devices. But these weren't ordinary papers. They bore official government seals, classified markings, and headers that indicated state secrets of the highest level. Marcus sat in stunned silence for a moment, trying to process the magnitude of what he had discovered. These documents could potentially compromise national security if they fell into the wrong hands. But why were they hidden in the Queen Consort's personal vehicle? He carefully extracted a few of the documents to examine them more closely. They included detailed intelligence reports about foreign governments, transcripts of private diplomatic conversations, and photographs of what appeared to be covert operations. Each document was stamped with security classifications that Marcus knew were reserved for only the most sensitive government operations. Officer Davies leaned into the car. "Sir, what did you find?" Marcus looked up at her, his face grave. "We need to secure this entire area immediately. No one comes in or out, and no one sees what's in this compartment except authorized personnel. Should I call Chief Inspector Williams?" "Call him, but use the secure line. And, Davies, we're going to need specialists from MI5 and possibly MI6. This is way beyond standard palace security." As Davies stepped away to make the calls, Marcus continued his examination of the hidden compartment. There were dozens of documents, each more sensitive than the last. Some contained information about British intelligence assets operating in foreign countries, while others detailed ongoing negotiations with international partners that were supposed to be completely confidential. But it was the recording devices that troubled Marcus the most. There were 3 small digital recorders, each no larger than a matchbox, along with several micro-SD cards that likely contained hours of secretly recorded conversations. Marcus carefully photographed everything in the compartment before touching anything else. He knew that preserving the evidence exactly as found would be crucial for any investigation that followed. Jeffrey Hartwell appeared at the driver's side window, his face now completely drained of color. "Officer Thompson, surely whatever you found can be explained. Perhaps these are simply documents that Her Majesty was asked to review for charitable purposes." Marcus looked up at the man, noting the desperate edge to his voice. "Step back from the vehicle, sir. This is now a crime scene." The words hung in the air like a physical presence. A crime scene. In the Queen Consort's personal car. The implications were staggering. Within an hour, the quiet courtyard had been transformed into a hive of activity. Specialists from various government agencies had arrived in unmarked vehicles, and a large white tent had been erected around the Bentley to shield it from curious eyes. Palace staff had been moved to a safe distance, and additional security cordons had been established around the entire area. Chief Inspector Williams arrived with 2 men in dark suits whom Marcus didn't recognize, but whose bearing immediately identified them as intelligence operatives. They spoke in hushed tones while examining the documents Marcus had discovered. "Thompson," Williams called out, "excellent work. But This investigation is now above your clearance level. I need you to write a detailed report of everything you observed and discovered, but you're not to discuss this with anyone else." Marcus nodded, understanding the gravity of the situation. But as he watched the specialist carefully removing items from the hidden compartment, he couldn't help but wonder how such sensitive material had ended up in the Queen Consort's car, and, more importantly, who had put it there. The morning that had started as a routine security check had become something far more serious. As Marcus filled out his incident report, he realized that he had stumbled upon something that could potentially rock the very foundations of the British establishment. In his report, he carefully documented every detail of his discovery: the unusual weight distribution of the car, the modifications to the dashboard, the hidden compartment, and the classified documents and recording devices he had found inside. He included precise times, detailed descriptions, and his professional assessment of the security implications. But even as he wrote, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. The documents he had glimpsed suggested a level of intelligence gathering and secret recording that went far beyond anything he had encountered in his years of royal protection duty. As the day wore on, and the investigation continued around the secured Bentley, Marcus found himself wondering about the bigger picture. How long had this been going on? Who else might be involved? And, most troubling of all, what was the ultimate purpose of gathering such sensitive intelligence and hiding it in the Queen Consort's personal vehicle? The answers to these questions would unfold in the days to come, but Marcus already knew that his discovery had set in motion events that would reach the highest levels of government and potentially change the course of British history. The palace, which had seemed so secure and peaceful that morning, now felt like the center of a storm that was just beginning to build. And Marcus Thompson, a career protection officer who had simply been doing his job, found himself at the very heart of what promised to be one of the most significant security breaches in modern British history. The emergency meeting convened in the secure briefing room beneath Windsor Castle at precisely 2 p.m. The underground chamber, constructed during World War II, had been modernized with the latest counter-surveillance technology and served as the palace's crisis management center. Around the polished oak table sat some of the most powerful figures in British intelligence and government. Director Sarah Blackwood of MI5 arrived first, her sharp gray suit and steel-rimmed glasses giving her the appearance of a stern headmistress rather than the head of Britain's domestic intelligence service. She was followed by Sir Malcolm Rothschild from MI6, a tall man with silver hair and the bearing of someone accustomed to handling international crises. The final member of the intelligence triumvirate was Colonel James Mitchell from the Government Communications Headquarters, Britain's Signals Intelligence Agency. Chief Inspector Williams sat at the far end of the table, looking distinctly uncomfortable in such elevated company. He had spent his career in palace security, dealing with protesters, overzealous tourists, and the occasional mentally unstable individual who managed to scale the palace walls. Nothing in his experience had prepared him for a potential intelligence scandal involving the Queen Consort herself. Director Blackwood opened a thick manila folder and spread its contents across the table. Photographs of the documents found in Camilla's Bentley were arranged in neat rows, along with transcripts of the recordings discovered on the digital devices. The material painted a disturbing picture of systematic intelligence gathering that had been ongoing for months, possibly years. "Gentlemen," Blackwood began, her voice crisp and businesslike, "what we have here represents the most serious security breach at the highest levels of government since the Cambridge 5 spy ring. The documents recovered from the Queen Consort's vehicle contain intelligence that could compromise ongoing operations in 14 different countries." Sir Malcolm leaned forward to examine one of the photographs more closely. It showed a transcript of a private conversation between the Prime Minister and the German Chancellor regarding Brexit negotiations that were supposed to be completely confidential. This conversation took place in Downing Street just 3 weeks ago. The only people present were the Prime Minister, the Chancellor, and their respective private secretaries. How did a recording end up hidden in a royal vehicle? Colonel Mitchell was studying what appeared to be intercepts of foreign intelligence communications. These signals intelligence reports are classified at the highest level. Access is restricted to perhaps a dozen people in the entire government. Someone with extraordinary clearance has been feeding information to whom exactly? The question hung in the air like smoke. Director Blackwood had spent the morning reviewing the implications of each document, and the scope of the intelligence compromise was staggering. Military deployment plans, diplomatic negotiation strategies, details of covert operations in the Middle East, and even personal intelligence assessments of foreign leaders, all carefully organized and stored in the hidden compartment of the Queen Consort's car. Chief Inspector Williams cleared his throat nervously. "Ma'am, what about the Queen Consort herself? Surely she couldn't have been aware of what was hidden in her vehicle." Director Blackwood fixed him with a steady gaze. "That's what we need to determine, Inspector. But I'm afraid the evidence suggests either willing participation or a level of negligence that borders on treason." The words sent a chill through the room. Treason, the charge that had toppled monarchs and destroyed dynasties throughout British history. The very suggestion that someone so close to the crown could be involved in espionage was almost unthinkable. Sir Malcolm opened another file containing background information on key palace staff. "We've begun preliminary investigations into everyone with access to the Queen Consort's vehicles and schedule. Geoffrey Hartwell, her private secretary, is of particular interest. His behavior during the vehicle inspection was highly suspicious." Colonel Mitchell nodded in agreement. "We've already begun monitoring his communications and financial records. Initial indications suggest regular contact with individuals connected to foreign intelligence services." "What about the modifications to the vehicle itself?" Williams asked. "Someone had to install that hidden compartment, and it was done professionally." Director Blackwood turned to another section of her file. "The technical analysis indicates the work was done by someone with intimate knowledge of automotive security systems. We're examining records of all authorized maintenance performed on royal vehicles over the past 2 years." As the meeting continued, the scope of the investigation expanded exponentially. Each piece of evidence led to new questions, new suspects, and new security concerns. The hidden compartment in the Bentley wasn't just a storage space. It was part of a sophisticated intelligence operation that had been carefully planned and executed over an extended period. The recording devices found in the compartment were state-of-the-art equipment, far beyond anything available to casual eavesdroppers. Analysis showed they had been used to record conversations in various locations throughout the palace, including private meetings in the Queen Consort's personal quarters. "We need to consider the possibility that this operation extends beyond the palace walls," Sir Malcolm observed grimly. "If they've been recording private royal conversations, what else might they have access to?" Colonel Mitchell was already ahead of him. "We're conducting a complete security sweep of all royal residences. Buckingham Palace, Sandringham, Balmoral, everywhere the Queen Consort has regular access. We're also reviewing all communications intercepts from foreign intelligence services over the past 6 months to see if any of this material has already been transmitted abroad." The technical analysis of the documents revealed another disturbing pattern. Many of the papers showed signs of having been photocopied multiple times, suggesting that copies had been distributed to unknown parties. Some documents had small markings in the corners that appeared to be coding systems used by professional intelligence operatives. Director Blackwood called for a 15-minute recess to allow the participants to absorb the magnitude of what they were dealing with. During the break, she stepped outside the briefing room and placed a secure call to the Prime Minister's office. "Prime Minister, this is Director Blackwood. We need to discuss the palace situation immediately." "Yes, sir, it's that serious. I'm afraid we're looking at potential charges of espionage at the highest levels." "Yes, sir, I understand the constitutional implications." When the meeting reconvened, Director Blackwood's expression was even more grave than before. "I've just spoken with the Prime Minister. This investigation now has the highest priority classification. We're authorized to use any and all resources necessary to determine the full scope of this operation." The discussion turned to the delicate matter of how to proceed without alerting potential conspirators that their operation had been discovered. The Queen Consort was scheduled to attend 3 public events over the next week, each requiring the use of her official vehicles. Any change to her normal routine might signal to whoever was running this operation that they had been compromised. "We need to maintain absolute normalcy while conducting the investigation," Sir Malcolm emphasized. "If there are other operatives involved, we can't afford to spook them before we've identified everyone in the network." Colonel Mitchell suggested installing discreet surveillance equipment in all of the Queen Consort's vehicles and personal spaces. "We can monitor all her communications and movements without her knowledge. If she's involved, we'll catch her in the act. If she's not, we might be able to identify who is using her access for their own purposes." The plan that emerged from the meeting was complex and risky. They would allow the Queen Consort to continue her normal activities while subjecting her to intense, but invisible surveillance. Every conversation would be recorded, every meeting monitored, and every person she encountered investigated. At the same time, they would conduct parallel investigations into her staff, her vehicles, and her residences. The goal was to map the entire intelligence network while gathering enough evidence to bring prosecutions that would stand up in court. What about the Queen herself? Williams asked quietly. Does she need to be informed about what we've discovered? Director Blackwood considered the question carefully. For now, we keep this circle as small as possible. The fewer people who know, the better our chances of uncovering the full conspiracy. If and when we have definitive proof of what we're dealing with, we'll brief Her Majesty personally. The meeting concluded with assignments for each agency. MI5 would handle the domestic investigation, focusing on palace staff and British nationals who might be involved. MI6 would investigate the international connections, trying to determine which foreign intelligence service might be running this operation. GCHQ would monitor all electronic communications and analyze the technical aspects of the surveillance equipment found in the Bentley. Chief Inspector Williams was assigned to continue normal palace security operations while serving as the liaison between the intelligence agencies and palace staff. His role would be crucial in maintaining the appearance of normalcy while the investigation proceeded. As the participants filed out of the briefing room, each carrying sealed folders containing their specific assignments, Director Blackwood remained behind to review the evidence one more time. The photographs spread across the table told a story of betrayal at the highest levels of British society. She picked up one document that particularly troubled her, a detailed assessment of the Queen's personal health and mental state, including information that should have been known only to her private physicians. The implications were staggering. If foreign intelligence services had access to such intimate details about the monarch's condition, they could potentially manipulate or exploit that information in ways that threaten national security. The next few days would be critical. The surveillance operation needed to be put in place without arousing suspicion. The investigation into palace staff needed to proceed without alerting potential conspirators, and the search for additional evidence needed to continue while maintaining absolute secrecy. Director Blackwood closed the files and locked them in her briefcase. As she walked through the ancient corridors of Windsor Castle toward the exit, she reflected on the historical irony of the situation. These same walls had witnessed plots and conspiracies for centuries, but never before had the stakes been quite so high. The British intelligence community was now engaged in a race against time. They needed to uncover the full scope of the espionage operation before their targets realized they had been discovered. The evidence found in the Queen Consort's Bentley was just the tip of the iceberg. Somewhere beneath the surface lay a conspiracy that could potentially undermine the very foundations of the British state. Outside the castle walls, life continued as normal. Tourists gathered around the gates hoping for a glimpse of royalty. Journalists filed their routine reports about palace activities, and the machinery of government continued its daily operations. None of them suspected that inside the ancient fortress, the most serious security crisis in modern British history was just beginning to unfold. The investigation that had started with a routine vehicle inspection was now a full-scale counterintelligence operation involving hundreds of personnel and resources from across the British intelligence community. And at the center of it all was a question that nobody wanted to ask, but everyone needed answered. How deep did the conspiracy go, and who else might be involved? The covert surveillance operation began at dawn the following Monday. MI5 technical specialists had worked through the weekend to install microscopic listening devices and cameras throughout Clarence House, the Queen Consort's official London residence. The equipment was so advanced that each device was smaller than a shirt button and virtually undetectable to standard security sweeps. Detective Inspector Rebecca Foster had been assigned to lead the surveillance team monitoring Camilla's daily activities. Foster was a veteran of domestic counterintelligence operations, having previously worked on cases involving Russian sleeper agents and Chinese industrial espionage. But nothing in her 15-year career had prepared her for the delicate task of investigating a member of the royal family. The Surveillance Command Center had been established in an unmarked office building 3 blocks from Clarence House. Banks of monitors displayed feeds from dozens of hidden cameras, while sensitive audio equipment captured every conversation within the Queen Consort's private residence. The technical setup was so sophisticated that they could distinguish between normal household noises and the subtle sounds of clandestine activity. Foster's first shift began at 6 a.m., just as Camilla's household staff began their daily routines. She watched through hidden cameras as maids prepared the morning tea service, gardeners tended to the private courtyard, and security personnel conducted their standard perimeter checks. Everything appeared perfectly normal, which somehow made it more unsettling. The Queen Consort emerged from her private quarters at 7:30 a.m., dressed in an elegant blue suit for a scheduled visit to a children's hospital. Foster observed her carefully, looking for any signs of stress or unusual behavior that might indicate awareness of the investigation. But Camilla appeared completely relaxed and natural as she reviewed her schedule with Jeffrey Hartwell. It was during this routine morning briefing that Foster detected the first anomaly. While discussing the day's events, Hartwell made several seemingly casual references to changes in schedule that hadn't been mentioned in the official itinerary. More troubling, he used phrases that Foster recognized as potential code words, terms that could have innocent meanings but might also be signals to unknown contacts. "Ma'am, the afternoon engagement has been moved to accommodate the weather," Hartwell said, consulting his tablet. "The garden party arrangements have been simplified accordingly." Foster frowned as she listened to the conversation. The weather forecast was clear, and there was no garden party scheduled for that afternoon. She made detailed notes of the exchange, wondering if Hartwell was using seemingly innocent conversation to convey information to someone who might be monitoring their communications. The surveillance team's investigation had already revealed disturbing information about Hartwell's background. Financial analysis showed regular deposits to his personal account that couldn't be explained by his palace salary. Phone records indicated frequent calls to numbers traced to commercial establishments that served as fronts for intelligence operatives. Most significantly, analysis of his personal computer had revealed encrypted files that he had attempted to delete. At 9 a.m., Camilla departed Clarence House in her official Bentley. Not the vehicle where the hidden compartment had been discovered, but an identical model from the Royal Fleet. The surveillance team had equipped this car with additional monitoring equipment, including GPS tracking that provided precise location data and audio surveillance that could capture conversations even when the vehicle was moving at high speed. Foster monitored the journey to the children's hospital, listening to the conversation between Camilla and Hartwell during the drive. On the surface, their discussion focused on the upcoming visit and the children they would meet. But Foster detected subtle undertones that suggested hidden meanings. "The special visitors from overseas will be particularly interested in the medical facilities," Hartwell mentioned casually. "The technology demonstrations should be quite revealing." Foster immediately flagged this comment for analysis. There were no overseas visitors scheduled for the hospital visit, and no technology demonstrations had been mentioned in the briefing materials. She began to suspect that Hartwell was using these public outings as opportunities to convey coded messages to unknown recipients. The hospital visit proceeded normally, with Camilla displaying her characteristic warmth and genuine interest in the children's welfare. She moved through the wards with practiced ease, speaking with young patients and their families while photographers captured images for the official record. To casual observers, it was a routine royal engagement performed with professionalism and compassion. But Foster noticed details that troubled her. During the visit, Hartwell stepped away from the main group several times to make phone calls. Each time, he positioned himself near specific locations in the hospital, always near windows that overlooked particular sections of the building, and always with clear sightlines to the surrounding streets. More concerning was Hartwell's interaction with Dr. Elena Volkov, the hospital's head of pediatric research. Dr. Volkov was originally from Eastern Europe and had been working in London for 5 years. On the surface, their conversation appeared to be a routine discussion about the hospital's work. But Foster observed body language and verbal cues that suggested a more complex relationship. "Doctor, your research into advanced medical technologies continues to impress," Hartwell said during their meeting. "I understand you've been collaborating with international colleagues on several fascinating projects." Dr. Volkov's response was carefully measured. "Yes, we maintain connections with medical institutions across Europe. Information sharing is essential for advancing pediatric care." Foster made note of the exchange, particularly the emphasis both speakers placed on certain words. The conversation had the formal quality of people who knew each other better than they were pretending, and the topics they discussed seemed to contain subtext that went beyond medical research. When the hospital visit concluded, the surveillance team followed Camilla's car as it made an unexpected detour through central London. Instead of returning directly to Clarence House, the vehicle stopped at an upscale coffee shop in Knightsbridge. Foster watched through long-range cameras as Camilla and Hartwell entered the establishment. Inside the coffee shop, they were joined by a third person, a middle-aged man in an expensive suit whom Foster didn't immediately recognize. The surveillance team quickly identified him as Viktor Petrov, officially listed as a cultural attaché at the Russian embassy, but suspected by British intelligence of being a senior intelligence officer. Foster felt her pulse quicken as she watched the three figures settle into a corner booth, their conversation shielded from casual observation by strategically positioned plants and decorative screens. The coffee shop meeting had all the hallmarks of a clandestine intelligence encounter: a public location with multiple exit routes, natural sound masking from other customers, and positioning that allowed surveillance detection. The audio surveillance equipment in Camilla's clothing picked up fragments of the conversation, but the ambient noise in the coffee shop made it difficult to capture complete sentences. What Foster could hear was deeply troubling. The materials from last week's collection came through clearly in Hartwell's voice. Petrov's response was partially obscured, but Foster caught. Moscow is very pleased with the quality of information. Camilla's voice was the most difficult to distinguish, but at one point Foster heard her say something about access to the morning briefings. The meeting lasted exactly 17 minutes, a duration that suggested careful planning rather than casual conversation. When it concluded, each participant left separately, with Petrov departing first, followed by Hartwell, and, finally, Camilla. The choreographed nature of their exit further convinced Foster that she was observing a professional intelligence operation. Back at the surveillance command center, Foster immediately called Director Blackwood to report the coffee shop meeting. The implications were staggering. They now had evidence of direct contact between the Queen Consort staff and a suspected Russian intelligence officer. Even more troubling was the possibility that Camilla herself was an active participant in the operation. Continue surveillance, but take no action, Director Blackwood instructed. We need to understand the full scope of this network before we move. And, Foster, this conversation never happened outside of our secure channels. The afternoon brought additional revelations as the surveillance team monitored communications intercepts from foreign intelligence services. The government communications headquarters had been scanning all diplomatic and intelligence traffic for references to the operation, and the results were deeply concerning. Encrypted messages between Moscow and the Russian embassy in London contained references to the Windsor source and morning briefing materials. While the encryption prevented full decoding, keyword analysis suggested ongoing intelligence cooperation and regular information exchanges. More damning was a partially decrypted message that referenced payment schedules and asset maintenance. The language was consistent with communications between intelligence handlers and their recruited sources, indicating a formal espionage relationship rather than casual information sharing. Foster spent the evening reviewing all the surveillance footage and audio recordings from the day's activities. Each piece of evidence painted a clearer picture of a sophisticated intelligence operation that had been running for an extended period. The operation appeared to have multiple layers of security. Hartwell served as the primary contact point, managing day-to-day intelligence gathering and serving as the intermediary between Camilla and foreign handlers. The use of royal engagements as cover for meetings provided perfect operational security. Who would suspect espionage activities during a visit to a children's hospital? The technical analysis of the hidden compartment in the Bentley revealed additional disturbing details. The storage space had been used repeatedly over many months, with microscopic evidence suggesting regular placement and removal of documents. The recording equipment found inside had memory cards containing hours of secretly recorded conversations from various locations throughout the royal residences. One recording that particularly troubled the intelligence analysts contained a conversation between Camilla and a senior government minister discussing confidential diplomatic negotiations. The recording quality was excellent, suggesting professional equipment and careful positioning. More significantly, the timestamp indicated the recording had been made just 2 weeks before a major international summit, where Britain's negotiating position had been mysteriously compromised. As Foster prepared her daily report for Director Blackwood, she reflected on the magnitude of what they had uncovered. The investigation had begun with the discovery of classified documents in a royal vehicle, but it was rapidly evolving into something far more serious: a comprehensive espionage operation that potentially compromised national security at the highest levels. The evidence suggested that Camilla's position as Queen Consort provided unprecedented access to sensitive government information, which was being systematically collected and passed to foreign intelligence services. The operation was so sophisticated and well-established that it had likely been running for years without detection. Foster's report concluded with a recommendation for expanded surveillance and the development of a comprehensive plan to dismantle the entire network. But she knew that any action against the Queen Consort would require approval from the highest levels of government and careful consideration of the constitutional implications. The investigation was no longer just about espionage. It had become a matter of national security that could potentially destabilize the monarchy itself. The evidence was mounting, but the political and legal challenges of pursuing a case against a member of the royal family were unprecedented in modern British history. As Foster locked her classified files in the secure safe and prepared to leave the surveillance center, she wondered about the long-term implications of what they had discovered. The British intelligence community was now engaged in the most sensitive investigation in its history, one that could reshape the relationship between the Crown and the state. The next phase of the operation would require even more careful planning and coordination. They needed to gather definitive proof of the espionage activities while avoiding any action that might alert the conspirators to the investigation. The stakes could not be higher, and the margin for error was virtually non-existent. The breakthrough came during the third week of surveillance, when government communications headquarters intercepted a coded message that changed everything. The transmission originated from the Russian embassy and was directed to a secure server in Moscow, but hidden within the seemingly routine diplomatic communication was intelligence that could only have come from the highest levels of the British government. Dr. Amanda Chun, GCHQ's lead cryptographic analyst, had been working 18-hour days trying to decode the intercepted messages. Her team had identified patterns in the communications that suggested regular intelligence transfers, but this particular transmission contained something unprecedented. Details from a classified National Security Council meeting that had taken place just 48 hours earlier. The meeting in question had discussed Britain's response to emerging threats in the South China Sea, including specific military deployment plans and intelligence assessments that were among the government's most closely guarded secrets. Only 12 people had attended the meeting, and the information had not been shared beyond that small circle. Director Blackwood received Dr. Chen's urgent report at 3 a.m. and immediately convened an emergency session with her senior staff. The implications were staggering. The espionage operation wasn't just collecting random intelligence, but was systematically accessing the most sensitive government discussions and transmitting detailed information to foreign powers. This changes everything, Blackwood told her assembled team as they gathered in the secure briefing room. We're not dealing with opportunistic intelligence gathering anymore. This is a coordinated operation with access to the innermost circles of government decision-making. The investigation team had already established that Camilla attended certain government briefings in her capacity as Queen Consort, but the level of detail in the intercepted message suggested access to information that went far beyond her official duties. Either she was actively participating in espionage activities, or someone with extraordinary access to classified materials was using her position as cover for their operations. Inspector Foster had been monitoring Camilla's activities around the clock, and her surveillance logs provided crucial context for the intelligence breach. On the day before the National Security Council meeting, Camilla had attended a private dinner at Downing Street with senior government officials. The gathering was supposed to be a social event, but Foster's surveillance had captured audio indicating discussions of sensitive policy matters. More significantly, Foster had observed unusual behavior from Geoffrey Hartwell during and after the dinner. The private secretary had made several trips to his car during the evening, each time carrying what appeared to be a small recording device. Analysis of the audio surveillance from his clothing had revealed the faint sound of electronic equipment being activated and deactivated. The technical team's examination of Hartwell's personal devices had uncovered sophisticated encryption software and communication programs that were far beyond the needs of a palace secretary. His laptop contained hidden partitions with files that had been repeatedly encrypted and deleted, suggesting systematic attempts to conceal his activities. But it was the discovery in Hartwell's Knightsbridge apartment that provided the most damning evidence. During a covert search conducted while Hartwell was attending official duties at the palace, MI5 agents found a hidden safe containing copies of classified documents, professional surveillance equipment, and what appeared to be payment records from foreign sources. The documents in Hartwell's safe included materials that could only have been obtained through direct access to government files or recording devices placed in secure locations. Some bore classified markings from the Cabinet Office, while others contained handwritten notes in Hartwell's distinctive penmanship summarizing conversations from high-level meetings. Director Blackwood studied photographs of the evidence while considering the implications for the ongoing investigation. The material in Hartwell's possession proved beyond doubt that he was actively engaged in espionage activities, but questions remained about the extent of Camilla's knowledge and involvement. The payment records found in the safe showed regular transfers from accounts linked to shell companies with connections to Russian intelligence services. The amounts were substantial, far more than Hartwell's legitimate palace salary, and the payments had been ongoing for more than 3 years. More troubling were handwritten instructions found among the documents, apparently from Hartwell's handlers, requesting specific types of information and providing guidance on collection methods. One note explicitly mentioned expanding access through the principal, language that suggested efforts to recruit or manipulate Camilla herself. The investigation had reached a critical juncture. The evidence against Hartwell was overwhelming, but moving to arrest him would likely alert other members of the espionage network and potentially compromise ongoing intelligence operations. The decision required careful coordination with the highest levels of government. Prime Minister Richardson received a classified briefing on the investigation at 10 Downing Street, attended by Director Blackwood, Sir Malcolm from MI6, and the Attorney General. The meeting lasted 4 hours and covered every aspect of the evidence that had been gathered. The Prime Minister's primary concern was the potential constitutional crisis that could result from charges against the Queen Consort. The monarchy's role in British society was largely ceremonial, but any suggestion of treason at the highest levels could undermine public confidence in the entire system of government. What are our options? Richardson asked the assembled officials. We can't simply ignore evidence of espionage, but we also can't destroy the monarchy over what might be the actions of a corrupt staff member. Director Blackwood presented 3 possible courses of action. The first option was immediate arrests and public trials, which would expose the full scope of the espionage but risked massive constitutional and diplomatic consequences. The second option was quiet prosecution behind closed doors, with plea agreements that would avoid public exposure but might not provide adequate deterrent effect. The third option was the most complex, a coordinated operation to feed false information through the compromised channels while gathering additional evidence, ultimately dismantling the entire network while minimizing public exposure. This approach would require months of additional surveillance and carried the risk that ongoing intelligence leaks could compromise other operations. Attorney General Sir David Pemberton raised the legal complexities involved in prosecuting a member of the royal family. The Queen Consort enjoys certain constitutional protections that complicate any criminal proceedings. We would need to establish clear evidence of personal knowledge and intent, not just negligence or manipulation by staff members. The decision was made to continue the surveillance operation while preparing for multiple contingencies. If evidence emerged of Camilla's direct involvement in espionage activities, criminal charges would be pursued regardless of the constitutional implications. If the evidence suggested she was being manipulated or used unwittingly, efforts would focus on dismantling the operation while protecting the monarchy's reputation. Meanwhile, the surveillance team intensified their monitoring of all communications and movements involving the Queen Consort and her staff. Foster's team installed additional equipment in vehicles and buildings, expanded their coverage to include all known associates, and began round-the-clock surveillance of the Russian embassy personnel who had been identified as Hartwell's handlers. The enhanced surveillance quickly produced new intelligence. Foster observed several additional clandestine meetings between Hartwell and his Russian contacts, each following carefully planned operational security procedures. The meetings used different locations and times, but always occurred during periods when Camilla was engaged in public duties that provided cover for Hartwell's absence. More significantly, the surveillance team intercepted communications between Hartwell and other palace staff members who appeared to be providing information about royal schedules and activities. The network was larger than initially suspected, with multiple sources within the palace establishment providing intelligence to support the operation. One particularly disturbing discovery involved Lady Margaret Thornberry, an elderly aristocrat who served as one of Camilla's ladies-in-waiting. Surveillance revealed that Lady Thornberry had been photographing documents in Camilla's private study using a concealed camera, and analysis of her personal finances showed payments from the same shell companies that were funding Hartwell. The realization that multiple palace staff members were involved in espionage activities raised new questions about the security of the entire royal establishment. How many other operations might be ongoing? What other sensitive information might have been compromised? And, most troubling of all, how long had foreign intelligence services been penetrating the inner circles of the British monarchy? Dr. Chin's cryptographic analysis continued to reveal the scope of the intelligence compromise. Intercepted messages contained references to operations in multiple countries, suggesting that the intelligence gathered from British sources was being shared with other foreign services and used to support international espionage activities. The investigation had evolved from a single incident involving hidden documents to the exposure of a comprehensive intelligence operation that threatened national security on multiple levels. The evidence suggested years of systematic espionage, with foreign operatives successfully recruiting sources at the highest levels of British society. As Foster prepared for another night of surveillance, she reflected on the magnitude of what they had uncovered. The investigation had revealed a level of penetration by foreign intelligence services that was unprecedented in modern British history. The implications extended far beyond the immediate criminal charges. The entire security apparatus around the monarchy would need to be rebuilt from the ground up. The next phase of the operation would focus on gathering the evidence needed for successful prosecutions while identifying and neutralizing all members of the espionage network. The challenge was immense, but the stakes were even higher. The security of the British state itself hung in the balance. The surveillance logs showed a pattern of activity that suggested the operation was preparing for a major intelligence transfer. Communications intercepts indicated increased activity at the Russian embassy, and Hartwell's behavior showed signs of preparation for something significant. Foster's team prepared for what they suspected would be the culmination of months of intelligence gathering, a final exchange that would provide the evidence needed to bring down the entire network. The timing would be critical, and the margin for error was non-existent. The investigation that had begun with a routine security check was about to reach its climax, with implications that would reshape British intelligence operations and potentially alter the relationship between the Crown and the state for generations to come. The final confrontation began at precisely 6:47 p.m. on a gray Thursday evening in November. Inspector Foster had been monitoring communications intercepts when Dr. Chin's urgent alert came through the secure channel. Major intelligence transfer in progress. All units to positions immediately. The surveillance team had been expecting this moment for weeks. Analysis of the espionage network's communication patterns had indicated that a significant operation was planned for late November, timed to coincide with a major NATO summit where Britain's classified negotiating positions would be extraordinarily valuable to foreign intelligence services. Foster watched through long-range surveillance equipment as Geoffrey Hartwell left Clarence House at precisely 7 p.m., carrying a leather briefcase that had not been part of his usual accessories. His destination was the Savoy Hotel, where intelligence indicated he would meet with his Russian handlers for what appeared to be the final transfer of a massive intelligence collection. The Savoy provided perfect cover for the operation. Its elegant lobby was always filled with international businesspeople and diplomats, making surveillance difficult while providing natural explanations for meetings between individuals of different nationalities. The hotel's multiple entrances and exits also offered operational security for anyone conducting clandestine activities. Director Blackwood coordinated the operation from the mobile command center positioned 3 blocks from the hotel. Teams from MI5, MI6, and elite police units were stationed at strategic locations throughout the area, ready to move on her command. The plan required precise timing to capture the entire network while gathering evidence that would stand up in court. At 7:23 p.m., Hartwell entered the Savoy's American bar, where he was joined by Viktor Petrov, the Russian cultural attaché, and 2 other individuals whom intelligence analysts immediately identified as senior operatives from the SVR, Russia's Foreign Intelligence Service. The meeting had all the characteristics of a major intelligence handover: multiple participants, secure location, and the careful operational security procedures that both sides had been practicing for months. Foster monitored the meeting through concealed surveillance equipment while a team of lip readers analyzed the conversation through directional cameras positioned around the bar. What they observed exceeded even their worst expectations about the scope of the espionage operation. Hartwell removed several items from his briefcase and placed them on the table between the participants. Among the items were what appeared to be classified documents, electronic storage devices, and a small recording device that he handled with particular care. The Russian operatives examined each item methodically, occasionally nodding in apparent satisfaction. The conversation, captured through sophisticated audio surveillance, revealed the extent of the intelligence that had been compromised. Hartwell provided his handlers with detailed information about upcoming government meetings, specific intelligence assessments about Russian activities, and, most damaging of all, advance warning about planned British intelligence operations. The summit materials are complete, Foster heard Hartwell say clearly, including the private assessments and contingency planning documents. Petrov's response was equally clear. Moscow is very pleased with the quality and scope of the intelligence. The compensation discussed previously will be transferred according to schedule. But it was the next part of the conversation that provided the most shocking revelation. One of the other Russian operatives, speaking in heavily accented English, asked about the principal's future cooperation. Hartwell's reply sent chills through everyone monitoring the surveillance. She remains unaware of the specific details, but her access continues to expand. The recent appointment to additional briefing committees provides opportunities we hadn't anticipated. The implication was staggering. The conversation suggested that while Camilla might not be fully aware of the espionage operation, her position was being systematically exploited to gain access to increasingly sensitive intelligence. Worse, her influence was apparently being used to secure additional access to classified materials. Director Blackwood made the decision to end the surveillance phase and begin the arrest operation. The evidence gathered over weeks of monitoring, combined with what they were observing in real time, provided more than enough justification for criminal charges against multiple participants. At 7:47 p.m., teams of armed police officers moved simultaneously on multiple locations throughout London. The operation, designated Windsor Cleanup, was the largest counterintelligence arrest operation in British history, involving more than 200 personnel and spanning 7 different sites across the capital. At the Savoy Hotel, Hartwell and his 3 Russian contacts were arrested without incident as they attempted to leave through separate exits. The briefcase Hartwell had been carrying contained a treasure trove of classified documents, including materials from National Security Council meetings, intelligence assessments from MI6, and detailed records of British diplomatic negotiations with various foreign governments. Simultaneously, Lady Margaret Thornberry was arrested at her Belgravia apartment, where investigators found a sophisticated photography setup for copying documents and encrypted communication equipment for transmitting intelligence to foreign handlers. Her arrest revealed that the espionage network had been operating at multiple levels within the palace establishment. The most delicate arrest took place at Clarence House itself, where Camilla was informed of the investigation and formally questioned about her knowledge of the espionage activities. Director Blackwood personally conducted the interview, accompanied by senior representatives from the Attorney General's office and the palace's legal counsel. The questioning lasted 4 hours and revealed a complex picture of manipulation and exploitation rather than willing participation. Camilla expressed genuine shock at the revelation of Hartwell's activities and provided detailed information about how her access to government materials had been arranged and managed. Jeffrey always handled my official correspondence and briefing materials, she explained during the interview. He told me it was necessary for him to review everything first to ensure I was properly prepared for meetings and discussions. I never suspected he might be copying or sharing any of the information. The investigation team's analysis of Camilla's testimony, combined with months of surveillance evidence, suggested that she had been manipulated rather than recruited. The espionage network had carefully cultivated her trust while systematically exploiting her position for intelligence-gathering purposes. However, the legal implications remained complex. While Camilla appeared to be a victim rather than a willing participant, her carelessness in handling classified materials had enabled the intelligence compromise. The Attorney General faced the unprecedented challenge of determining appropriate consequences for a member of the royal family whose negligence had facilitated espionage. The arrest triggered a massive investigation into the security of all royal establishments and government briefing procedures. Every document that Camilla had received over the previous 3 years was reviewed to determine what intelligence might have been compromised, while security procedures at all royal residences underwent complete overhaul. The international implications were equally serious. The intelligence that had been passed to Russian services included information about ongoing operations in multiple countries, diplomatic negotiations with various allies, and strategic assessments that could affect Britain's relationships with partner nations for years to come. Prime Minister Richardson addressed Parliament in a closed session to brief senior members about the espionage operation and its implications. The disclosure prompted immediate reviews of intelligence sharing agreements with allied nations and comprehensive assessments of security procedures throughout the government. The trials of the arrested conspirators began 6 months later in a specially secured courtroom with restricted access and comprehensive secrecy orders. Hartwell, facing charges of espionage, conspiracy, and treason, eventually pleaded guilty in exchange for cooperation with ongoing investigations into the full scope of foreign intelligence penetration of British institutions. His testimony revealed that the operation had been planned and executed over a period of 5 years, with careful attention to recruiting sources at multiple levels of government and society. The Russian intelligence services had specifically targeted individuals with access to royal circles, recognizing that such sources could provide unprecedented access to sensitive information. Lady Thornberry, despite her advanced age, was sentenced to 10 years in prison for her role in the conspiracy. The court determined that her willing participation in espionage activities, combined with the serious nature of the intelligence compromise, warranted severe punishment regardless of her personal circumstances. The Russian operatives were expelled from Britain and declared persona non grata, effectively ending their diplomatic careers and sending a strong message about the consequences of engaging in espionage activities on British soil. For Camilla herself, the resolution was more complex. After extensive legal deliberations, the Attorney General determined that while her negligence had facilitated the espionage operation, criminal charges were not warranted given the evidence that she had been manipulated rather than willingly participating. However, her role within the government was significantly restricted. Her access to classified materials was permanently revoked, her participation in official briefings was ended, and her public duties were restructured to eliminate any involvement in matters of national security or government policy. The constitutional implications of the affair led to comprehensive reforms in the relationship between the monarchy and the government. New protocols were established for royal access to classified information, security procedures for all royal residences were upgraded, and additional oversight mechanisms were implemented to prevent similar compromises in the future. Detective Sergeant Marcus Thompson, whose routine security check had uncovered the initial evidence, was quietly promoted and transferred to a specialized counterintelligence unit. His thorough professionalism and attention to detail had prevented what could have been an even more serious compromise of national security. The investigation officially concluded 18 months later, but its effects continued to influence British intelligence operations for years afterward. The affair demonstrated the sophisticated methods used by foreign intelligence services to penetrate British institutions and highlighted the ongoing need for vigilance at all levels of government and society. Inspector Foster, reflecting on the investigation years later, noted that the case had fundamentally changed how British intelligence services approached the protection of national secrets. The realization that even the most trusted institutions could be penetrated by foreign operatives led to comprehensive reforms in security procedures and ongoing monitoring programs. The hidden compartment in the Queen Consort's Bentley, which had started as a puzzling discovery during a routine vehicle inspection, had ultimately exposed one of the most serious espionage operations in modern British history. The investigation revealed the vulnerability of even the most secure institutions to sophisticated foreign intelligence operations and demonstrated the ongoing challenges facing democratic nations in protecting their most sensitive secrets. The affair remained classified at the highest levels for national security reasons, but its lessons continued to influence British intelligence operations and security procedures throughout the government. The investigation had prevented potentially catastrophic intelligence compromises while revealing the constant vigilance required to protect democratic institutions from foreign interference. In the end, the discovery of classified documents in a royal vehicle had led to the exposure and dismantling of a comprehensive espionage network, the protection of countless ongoing intelligence operations, and fundamental reforms in how Britain protects its most sensitive national security information. The case served as a reminder that national security depends not just on sophisticated technology and professional intelligence services, but on the careful attention and professional dedication of individuals like Detective Sergeant Thompson, who understood that even routine duties can have extraordinary importance in protecting the nation's security.